Okay. Let's roll call it, Kevin.
All right. Vice President Diamond.
Here.
Director Hetherington.
Here.
President Odette.
Here.
Director Rolfe is absent. And Director Stevens.
Here.
Alrighty. Special order business, Kevin. You got COVID-19.
Just a quick one.
Mm-hmm.
These are going to probably end fairly soon. I won't know that I'll put it on every month like I have been doing, but just to give the board an update, most of our staff, or all that have chose to receive a vaccination, have all had the first vaccine. So that's really good. And I was on an area managers meeting call today, which you'll hear me reference back a little bit during the meeting today, that most of the public agencies have had the same success getting the vaccine. The town of Truckee is doing it right now. Most of the Placer County agencies had it about 2 weeks ago, and all the Nevada County agencies are getting it right now. So that's a good thing. The other question came up that might be interesting to the board is how many public agencies are going to start meeting in person and when. It did sound like some are going to start to attempt to meet in person in maybe as early as May, but just with the elected boards, and then bring the public in later as things continue to hopefully improve. Others are saying they're going to ride it out and keep meeting virtually for a while and see where it goes. So right now, didn't sound like anyone was meeting up here locally was meeting in person, their board of directors. But as we get into the summer, we'll start talking about that, and the board can talk about how you want to maybe change the way we meet. But things continue well. We've had very good success with our COVID protocols and have a healthy employee group, and we're very excited that the vast majority are at least almost 2 weeks. Just about all of us are 2 weeks into the first dose, and some have only have one dose with the J&J vaccine. So that's the latest that I have.
Awesome. And Kat has joined us. How you feeling? Heard you got in an accident.
Yeah, I'm feeling better. Thanks.
Good. Okay, so public comment. Members of the public may make comments at this time on any items not appearing on the agenda that are of interest to the public and are within the jurisdiction of the board and ACAT. Do we have any public comment?
I don't have any submitted via email for items that are not on the agenda.
Okay. Then let's roll right to the consent agenda. Does anybody want to pull anything?
I want to pull February 11th for a small minor change or addition.
Okay.
And I would like to pull the classification and compensation study RFP.
And I would like to pull the number 7, the snow blower.
Okay.
And I'll make a motion to approve tabs, the minutes February 24th, minutes February 24th, minutes March 10th, monthly service bills and fees. That's it.
Second?
I'll second.
Second.
Roll call.
Vice President Diamond.
Yes.
Director Hetherington.
Yes.
President Odette.
Yes.
Director Rolfe.
Yes.
And Director Stevens.
Yes.
Okay, Rick, you go first. February 11th minutes.
I'd like you to go to line 67, and I want to add this. We talked about this discussion of 202 widening and extending, and what was not said was Director Diamond proposed to take that the lengthening of 202 out of the master plan, and that was not agreed to.
But I thought that with the new format of the meetings that we weren't including detail like that.
I thought that was important detail since you made a big deal about it.
Oh, all right.
And invited 50 people to make comments.
Well, what we can do is we can put a bullet point in the minutes that just say that was discussed, is the idea that there was a discussion on that, but no action taken, something like that, if you want.
Perfect. Good with that, Rick?
If you really don't want to do anything, then forget about it. Let's approve the minutes as written.
You can put the bullet in, Kevin.
Okay, we'll put
Do we
that-
need to approve these one at a time since we pulled them out?
Probably good to do a motion one at a time.
I make a motion to approve the minutes of February 11th with the bullet, as Kevin noted.
Second.
Roll call.
Okay, Vice President Diamond,
Yes.
Director Hetherington,
Yes.
President Odette,
Yes.
Director Rolfe,
Yes.
and Director Stevens.
Yes.
Perfect. Mary, you're up.
Okay, on the classification and compensation study, we had talked about trying to join with other utility districts, and in Friday's Sierra Sun, I noticed that the Truckee Donner PD is doing a classification and compensation study for their management and technical positions, not their union positions. And I was thinking this is a perfect opportunity to partner and share costs, since in these classification and compensation studies, they're looking at all the other all the other special districts and make correlations in terms of type of tasks. And, so they all look at each other, and this would be an opportunity to share that cost.
I agree with that.
So I did talk with Brian Wright at the PUD today, and I also asked all the other PUD or all the other districts if they're doing class and comp studies, and the only one right now that's doing one is the Truckee Donner PUD. So I will have a conversation. Brian and I are going to follow up with each other and get a little more detail. There was a little bit of concern expressed by them that, sometimes these are not, there may not be an economies of scale, there might be, but we're happy. We're going to sit down and talk through that and look at it and see, what they're doing, what we're doing, and if there's a way to partner to save money. I agree with that there should be a conversation to see if there is something that we can do there. So if you'd like, we're not in a big rush to do this, but, if you want, we can, push this a month and come back and tell you what we, have in April, or if you'd like to make some motion subject to us checking that, that's fine.
No, I'd like it to come back next month since we're not in a rush. And I know that all the special districts look at the other special districts one at a time. So, and having reviewed them in the past, that there is that correlation on many types of jobs. So yeah, if you could bring it back in a month after that conversation, it would save them money, if it does save money. And that's part of the RFP process.
Yeah, and I'll suggest also that you reach out to the others. Is anybody close? Are they doing it this year?
Yeah, no, there's some of the agencies in the basin. I've had preliminary conversations with a few of those with Sean and others, and I'll follow up with them too.
Cool. So do we need a motion to push this to next month, or?
No, I think just by consensus, the idea is to continue it.
Okay. David, you're up number 7.
Okay, yeah, this is pretty easy. I went and looked at that snow blower, and it's definitely too big for my garage, so I have no problem selling it off. But if one of the reasons that we were going to sell it off was the fact that the state of California will not permit its use because of its emissions, presumably we're going to sell it off and it's going to move someplace else, which is still on planet Earth. So what I was wondering if we would be willing to do is to approve the motion, but to also agree that the money that is generated from the resale, that we will use that toward some greenhouse gas reduction project to sort of offset the continued operation of that, no matter where it ends up going.
That seems
How
like
much-
that
Sorry.
seems like, yeah.
Great idea.
How much are we talking?
Dave, what do we think in the market value that is?
We're still working on that, but it's a tough one to get. But we're hoping it'll be $20,000. Could be slightly more, but working on that. See if we can sell it consignment, which could boost that. But that's the ballpark, 20,000.
Dave, Airfield Trader has a 1999 model of this that is being sold for like 140 or 150,000.
And yes, David, I would say that there is a market out there, and we're looking into that. There's a consignment group out of Colorado that has a parent company in Quebec. We're looking into that to see if we can put it out for consignment, because here in California, at our location, as opposed to putting it on a truck, sending it to Colorado and incurring that large transportation fee. So, and we have, you know, like you folks, come to grips that due to the tier 0 rating of that unit, it cannot be utilized by another agency or contractor. Now, someplace I didn't want to get too far down into it is a private citizen could buy that for their own use, not doing snow removal for pay or compensation. So the likelihood of that is probably fairly limited. And you know, we did have an inquiry with Carson City Airport. If we were giving it away for $1, they would be more than happy to take it.
Get it.
But we have other avenues, I think, to start with.
Gotcha. Okay, so should I just?
We have a motion? Yeah, do we need a motion?
Yes.
Okay, I move to approve the staff request to declare the 1993 self-propelled Oshkosh snow blower as surplus property, and to direct staff to dispose of blower at a fair market value or best offer, and to use the resulting funds for a future greenhouse gas reduction project.
I'll second it.
Hey,
Roll call.
roll call. Vice President Diamond,
Yes.
Director Hetherington,
Yes.
President Odette,
Yes.
Director Rolfe,
Yes.
Director Stevens.
Yes.
I do like the, I do like the 150 or even 100 better than 20.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
the state, you know, I mean, the shipping cost even on that would be worthwhile.
We will look into that, Mary.
Housing, because it's that big.
Yep, we'll report
All right,
back.
so, thank you. Number 8, do we need to do anything about that? Or is that included in the consent?
That's just a no motion. That's just for information.
Okay. Then in our new
New format.
efficient manner,
Yeah.
we're going to go to general manager's report. And Kevin, is there anything you want to fill us in on in addition
Only if
to
you
your
have
report?
questions.
Anyone have any questions? And we can go in order with David first this time.
I had a few minor questions that Kevin answered in email. They weren't consequential.
Okay, Mary?
No.
Rick? Kat?
No.
Kat first. Kat, then Rick.
Questions?
Nope. Okay, great. Do we need a motion to approve it or we just move on?
Move on. Yep.
Actually, you know what? We need public comment. Where's our attorney? Any public comment on this?
No public comment.
Okay, then let's, same thing on ops and maintenance department report. Anything you guys want to share with us?
Well, I've got those numbers of items. If you folks have any questions, I would certainly be more than happy to answer them.
Okay, anyone? David?
I do. But do you want to go first with me? Because you went first with me last time.
No, I'm going to go first with Mary.
Okay.
Okay.
Any questions?
I had some questions. Kevin answered them about the hangar inspections that are done monthly. And I really like the checklist that he's putting up next to the switch. I think he sent that to everybody.
I don't think I did, but I will. It's
Yeah.
looks like this. Well, you can't really see it, but it's we're going to put these pilot checklists that pilots are asked or kind of encouraged to do before they fly. We're going to put it right above the switch, so they have something to do for the 86 seconds that the door is opening.
And I had gone to a safety stand down in Vegas at one of the NBAA conferences, and it was exactly this type of thing of, for the pilot to ask themselves kind of these questions. It's just a checklist for them. And so I think it's awesome. Thank you for doing it, putting it together. It's a great idea.
I'll get that out to the rest of the board.
Okay, then we have Kat. Any questions?
Nope.
Then Rick?
No.
David?
I do have on the momentary switch policy. I just got a thought on that. I think it's super lenient. I would suggest a webinar to handle that first step, and then keep the recording available for others. Email them monthly and let them know, by the way, there's a momentary switch policy. Here it is. Watch that. And I would make the first infraction the fine, and the second infraction the eviction. Because otherwise, the way I look at it now, I wonder if people are going to, especially those who kind of have that sense that they would make a modification like this to their door, that they might look at this and go, well, I can get away with it for one time. So I'll once I get caught, I'll stop doing it. That's my concern about it.
What do you guys think? I mean, you're the pilot. I defer to you, David. You're in the field there.
Being asked to do this is such a trivial, inconsequential thing. I'm perfectly happy to sit there and hold the button. My life is not that important that I can hold the button while my door. It's not like I can open the door and start pushing the airplane out before the door is open anyway. So to me, this is not an unreasonable policy to be asked. It is in the name of safety. And Kevin has told us that we do have data to back up that since we put those switches in there, that we haven't had any of the issues that we've had before. So I don't understand why anybody would have an issue with this. And I certainly don't understand giving them one chance to manipulate or to work somehow on the box to bypass a safety mechanism. To me, this is,
I agree with David that warning is not. You don't need it. Now, second, the fine of $300 is nothing. It ought to be more. And thirdly, if the switch has been bypassed in a nefarious manner, nefarious is defined in Webster as flagrantly wicked or evil. Is that what modifying those switches are? I don't like that word. It's just wrong. That's my comments.
All right. Well, Mary, you're next alphabetically.
Okay. I just want something done. To me, it is not just, it is safety for the pilot too. It is safety for our staff. So one of these hangars doors did fall down, and coming off the cables is dangerous. So I guess I'm deferring to what Rick and David are saying.
Stacy has videos of the hangar door coming down very rapidly.
Kat, thoughts?
Yeah, I'm in line with what David and Rick said about penalties. Are we anticipating there's going to be a lot of pushback on this?
We're trying to do a lot of outreach on it, and you will get a few emails or comments on it, likely. I will say that the vast majority of the tenants do a really good job with this and understand it and follow it. There's a few that are don't feel it's necessary. And so there could be a little bit of fallout, as there should be if those folks don't start doing it the right way or continue doing it the right way. But we will carry forward and give you any of the comments that we get from pilots at the April meeting when we adopt this. Sorry, Dave, I didn't mean to step in on your item.
It's all good. I think I agree with them, and I think there's no warning. It's like driving down the freeway. You don't get a warning if you're in the carpool lane. You just get a big fat ticket. That it should be like that.
I'd like.
You got enough, Kevin?
I would be curious to know what Dave thinks of it, because he's this is his thing.
Well, I really, it is nice to hear the backing that the board is giving, and also to maybe stiffen, as Rick states, to increase that fee for bypassing. What I have seen is that we are getting more buy-in from the hangar tenants, but I've still got some that are avoiding me via phone call to discuss it. And that to me shows that they are not as serious about it as we are. And I would like I'd like to make this as safe as we can for all parties involved. That is the root of the intention of putting those switches in there.
I agree. I just don't, this to me is like not, it's not like the switch gets bypassed and you're like, oh, I totally accidentally did that. You know, it's not like you were going 10 miles over the speed limit or that you forgot to lock a gate behind you. It's like this is an intentional, no matter who does it, the hangar tenant to me is responsible. I'm responsible for who gets in and out of my hangar other than staff. And I would expect that if I let somebody in my hangar and they tampered with that switch, it's my responsibility as a hangar tenant. And I completely accept that.
Question for Dave, to wire it back, you know, if somebody tampers with it and then you have to wire it back, how much time does that take on staff time to fix it?
Well, Mary, we've seen varying degrees of really, it's been the contraptions more than anything else. The bypassing of the switch with magnet devices, zip ties, and things like that. We did have, I can think of at least one individual that electrically bypassed, and it was a relatively quick, which is probably 15 minutes or less for getting it back to the momentary method.
Okay. That would go to how much, you know, the $300 fine or, yeah.
It should
Yeah,
hurt.
as Dave mentioned, most of the bypassing is sticking a coat hanger or wedging something in the button. It's very, I don't, you know, just one time we've had someone that's actually tried to rewire the box, but.
So you have what you need, Kevin?
Yeah, Dave, I think we're in good shape. And then we're also working with Josh just to make sure that our policy meets the state of California guidelines for, you know, if we do have to evict, that we've met our requirements, which that may fall into a separate category. But when you get it in April, it'll be 100% ready to go, at least from a staff perspective and based on your comments.
Great. Thanks. Do we have any public comment on the Operations and Maintenance Department report?
No public comment.
All right. Then we have Finance and Administration. Kelly Wu, do you have anything you want to point out to us?
Sorry.
It's okay.
No, things are well. We're in the middle of our audit, working our way through it. Field work will be happening next week, but still probably, you know, remote field work. But
Okay.
no, business as usual. Thank you.
Then, Kat,
Can I put
you're
one thing in
first.
there?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just one thing real quick. It's mentioned here, and I think it's also mentioned in Hardy's report, but you may have, we have one tenant of nonprofit, the Roundhouse, Truckee Roundhouse, that may be approaching you about some way to work on their rent abatement that they had during COVID. COVID was particularly difficult for them. So just wanted to put that out there that may come forward with them presenting a plan on how they might want to get caught up. They are paying now, but there was a part where they didn't.
Okay. Kat, you're first. Any questions? Can't hear you, I guess. Okay, Rick?
On the balance sheet, primary question is, it looks to me like we've got a lot of money in the bank. It's not all ours, but it's substantial. It's probably 11 million, 10 million. That was
Can't
a
hear
question to you, Kelly.
Yes.
Right, no, I had you on mute. Yes, 8.4 in cash and cash equivalents. Our usual 1.25 in investments. And then another, well, in current, and then another 250, so 1.5 with Wells Fargo Advisors.
So what's the number? 10 million?
What's that?
I thought you were in the county.
9.9.
10 million. Thank you. A lot of money.
Is there a question there, Rick, or just an observation?
Observation.
Okay. David, any questions?
Nope.
Mary?
I just, having gone through the income statement, I just noticed that electricity surcharge was very high, cold months. And I talked to Kevin, he said that's all recovered later. Like each hangar in the old hangars, there's one master meter and it feeds the entire hangar row. So, for example, everybody on hangar row D, if one tenant is using a significant amount of power, everybody in hangar row D pays for that. And that's something that I would think the tenants would want to be aware of. If somebody's running a fridge and a block heater and hanging out there with a room heater, everybody is paying for that. So that was of note, because it was a big jump. It was 4,700 budgeted, and it was 8,600 is actual cost. And that was the only thing that really stood out to me. Over the year, it was year to date, it's 17,000 has been spent as compared to 9,000 budgeted. So some people must be running a lot of electricity heaters.
I think if I could also, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that tends to lessen as we get into the summer. So
yeah.
Then as you get to the end of the year, it'll kind of even out a little bit, but they use more energy. And Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you see excessive amounts of stuff plugged in, we unplug stuff when we do those quarterly inspections.
We do. We look at what is non-aeronautical, and we would unplug that. Now, we would not unplug somebody's freezer and have food go bad or anything of that nature. They would get a phone call to be alerted to that is not an aviation need, and that they're going to need to remove the food, take the freezer elsewhere.
Okay, good.
And just to clarify too, what the number that you're talking, 17,000 versus a budget of 9,400, that's revenue. That's what we're billing to the hangar tenants. So we're ahead of budget on the revenue front.
Okay, that's good to know. Okay, that was great.
Awesome.
Okay.
Anything else, Mary?
Nope. Thank you.
Okay, I have a couple questions for you, Kelly, or comments and questions. One, let's see, what page am I on here? Page 2. You say payroll and employee benefits. Total payroll and benefits year to date are $664,000 versus a budget of $670. And then commentary said we're slightly over budget, but those numbers are under.
Oh,
if I'm reading it right.
Yep. You are.
So, which one's right?
Under.
So we're slightly under.
The CalPERS line is slightly over, but overall payroll is under. Yep.
Okay, cool. Also, if I read it right, we have a total of 131 people on various hangar lists. Is that correct?
Yep.
That's a lot of people. I mean, how many do we have as tenants?
There's 230, well, just under 230 hangar tenants total.
That's good, supply and demand. And also, I just wanted to say I really like the format of the financials, the way they're coming out.
Yay,
so thank you.
I'm glad. You're welcome.
And that's it for me. So thank you, Kelly. And I think, do we have any public comment on that? Finance and Administration Department?
No public comment.
Alrighty. Let's go to Aviation and Community Services, tab 12. Anything you guys want to share?
Well, I always want to talk about the ops and comment report.
Well, I mean, Hardy, is there anything you want to point out to us before we start asking?
No, it's all there. It's pretty comprehensive. I don't have any highlights that aren't written down. Put a lot of stuff in there about the flight procedures outreach, finishing some of the collateral. So there's a lot of diagrams in there. But happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. Rick, you're first in my rotation. Any questions?
No.
Okay. David?
Yeah, I just have two questions, or a comment and a question. The comment is that I did speak to Kevin a little bit about this. If we look at the numbers of comments that we're getting, we're seeing a trend of increasing comments. But we also know every time we discuss these things that, well, some people have stopped commenting, and well, this, certain households are doing, we've got like all these different variables on it. I'm just thinking that I know this sounds bad, but maybe we should stop thinking of the number of comments as a metric of measurement, because it seems like no matter what the trend ever shows us, we have a reason to disbelieve it. So that's just one thing that we could maybe think about. And the second thing is just a question. Would it be difficult to see the number of comments attributed to our various commercial operators? Do we know that?
Yeah, we could do that.
Okay, because I mean, for me, I think of these things in terms of is there any possible corrective action that we can take? And you know, if a comment comes in from a pilot and the pilot did something one time and the pilot is not doing that all the time, the wind was bad or the visibility or what, or the traffic was, you know, but if we're getting them like recurrently, especially with the commercial operators, we do have a communication channel with them to kind of discuss that and see if we might be able to actually improve something that's ongoing, or if they're just one-time things, then not so much of an issue.
Well, hey, Director Diamond, I would mention that in this report, David and I talked about making a ratio out of operations per comment. We used to have that a while back, but if our operations are linear, then comments will follow as a ratio of those operations. So every quarter you're going to see, you know, comments for jets are up, comments for pistons are up, comments are just up because it's a linear relationship. So the operations for comment was a way to kind of show apples for apples. So if there was something the airport did to show a change in the number of comments, I think it's a more proper way to really use the metric. So if the board is acceptable, we could put the operations per comment ratio and the operations per comment per household ratio in as a metric to try and answer the question that you posed. Because right now, if you have 100 operations and you have 10 comments, and you have 200, you have 20, every time you look at the comments column, it just keeps going up and up and up. It's kind of irrelevant at that point.
Right. Which would be fine. The other thing I think about is because we're not dealing with a data set in the tens of thousands, that a conversation on Nextdoor could lead to a bunch of new comments in the next few weeks, just because people are like, oh, we're going to go report this, and we're going to, you know, or the flip side, if 5 or 6 people decide I never get the resolution I'm looking for, I'm going to stop commenting. That completely dramatically changes what we're looking at. I mean, you know, we don't have, again, because it's not a huge data set, it's really easy to see the numbers jumping all over the place. And I feel like it's incumbent upon me as a director, when I'm looking at it, to see if I see a trend toward a problem or a trend toward improvement. But then, like I said, it seems like if we bring that up, you know, a trend toward improvement is countered with the concept that, well, people have stopped commenting. And a trend toward a problem is countered by, well, because we had one person that was starting to do a lot of commenting about. So I just kind of wonder, with the very, very few comments that we get in proportion to our operations, if that metric is serving us very well. I'm not really sure if it is. Again, to get actionable data out of it. How do we fix a problem when we can't really trust the data? That's my thought.
Do you have a suggestion or an action item on that?
I have an action item. I have a suggestion about it, but it's going to really sound like it's calculated given our next agenda item. But just basically that if we did have an ongoing conversation with a large group from the community, I think that would actually give us a better sense of when things are truly improving or when they're not improving. Just because of that, the inconsistency in commenting. But I mean, I'm happy to leave it. If everybody wants to leave it, I'm not saying that I'll go crazy if it's not removed. I'm just like trying to educate, or not. I'm trying to discipline myself to stop imagining trend from the comments. And without that imagining the trend, I'm not really sure there's any actionable option from looking at the comments.
If I could add one thing on that, but good.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to mention there are some benchmark studies. One of them is the Minneapolis Airports Commission did a benchmark study on the objectives and the metrics for a well-run noise office inside a airport system. And so they had a lot of ways that they measure the quality of their efforts. Comments was one of those ways, but there's a number of other ways outlined in the study. I sent it to the board about 18 months ago, but I also sent it to David Banquist, and I'm happy to resend that. It's kind of considered within the noise and airports industry, really kind of a groundbreaking study to understand how airports can measure annoyance, but happy to walk through that or present it at some future board meeting if the board's interested in learning some of those different ways.
If others are, that would be great. I just wondered, like, for something like that, like when they're talking about measurements of comments, are they talking about airports that are getting thousands of comments a month, where they might actually be able to determine that there's a trend or a median that's going up or going down? That's why I just feel like for our limited, tiny little numbers, I'm not sure with comments that we ever really learn anything.
I would, and looking at that again, Hardy, if you could resend it.
Oh, you bet.
Just on the comment topic, the thing I look at on those and is, comments is obviously important. I want to know, but comments doesn't tell you how many people called, or how many people contacted you. That's just a number of comments. And so the metrics that I think are important is the households and new households. That's one that I always look at is how many new households commented. And so having the ops per comment and then having households per comment, I think is handy. But yeah, I agree that the comment data itself is, like Dave and I were talking just about January, well, we had 15 in January of 2020, but in 2021, we had 65. And so you think, wow, that's a lot more annoyance. And it was for some individuals. One individual commented 35 times. Is that a 330% increase in annoyance? I don't know. I don't think so. But we did have more comments, right. And we had more households. But those numbers can get all wonky. So having those metrics, I think, are really handy to kind of measure that.
Okay.
I'll mention too, David finished his curfew study, so he did a survey of some of our previous callers, 228 previous callers, and he and Emily called everybody. And we were looking at the graphs today, and I think that'll give us some insight as well onto maybe some more long-term outlook toward what some of those, what's annoying, what's not annoying, why people call and why people don't call. So I think we could present that when Kevin has it on the board agenda for you, and I think that may give us some insight too to understand how we can measure true annoyance.
Okay. Mary.
There it is. And I began to see what your, this ops per comment per household, how that falls out. I don't know that I want to give up anything. You're going to have to go to a smaller font, but that's worth a try to see what that looks like. That's one thought. The other thing is that the airport origins, that it totaled up to less than 1% for all of 2020. For the month, it was 0.88%, again, less than 1%. So I talked to Kevin about this, and in terms of airport origins, he had the idea of maybe we want to talk about regions. The Bay Area being a region, how many of our, and I'm throwing this out here for the board to look at it too, as compared to specific airports, so LA as being one area, Bay Area, what's coming from Arizona, I think that could be useful because 1% doesn't tell me a lot in terms of airport origin, the specificity. Also noticing that the top 5 commercial operators, they constitute 25 to 30% of all operations. Then up here we're saying that the touch and goes constitute 35%, and then what was it, 40% we were saying home-based aircraft. Am I adding that all up? Is that how we're...
35% touch and go number is 35% of single engine piston aircraft.
Okay, so that's a single piston. Okay.
Yeah.
So that would be 35% of 1228. That would be about 400 ops. Right. That's what you got.
And on this report, we kind of changed how we report touch and goes for the first time. There's a footnote in there about it.
Yeah.
We've always reported what the tower has given us.
Mhm.
And we know that that doesn't capture everything. So we're using a high level estimate of 35% single engine piston operations to report
So
that
how-
number.
Why 35%? Why not 30? Why not 50? I mean, where does that come from? Is that a swag?
Mike Cook did quite a bit of looking into how we report that, and it's all part of I think some of the master planning that's going on. Hardy.
We spent a bunch of time with Brad Musinski, and we looked at a bunch of different numbers, and Mike and I were in agreement that we thought that figure captured it adequately as compared to the number if measured directly by the tower. And then when the tower's closed in the summer, you have touch and goes in that period when the tower's closed, so making an additional add-in for that. Also, the way that touch and goes, itinerant, and local flights are measured, the tower measures it slightly different than our master planning effort. So to align our monthly ops and comment report with planning documents, particularly the upcoming master plan effort, we felt that it was the best number that reconciled those differences and met in the middle, so that we were comparing both planned numbers to operationally measured numbers.
Okay. Then are we able to distinguish IFR flights? How many are IFRs?
IFR is really challenging. One of the biggest challenges is that aircraft can file a flight plan, but actually land in VFR conditions, so they would cancel with Oakland Center and proceed to the airport VFR. So our tower measures IFR operations by taking a physical count of instrument flights. But there's a bunch of different ways to measure it. So David and I have been talking about the data sets we get both from Vector and also from other third-party people like FlightAware, trying to reconcile it to come up with an estimate. And I think David was putting out somewhere in the 80% range, the B range. You're looking at maybe coming up with a metric or an estimate to measure those with that type of accuracy.
Yeah, between Vector and FlightAware, they both told me kind of a similar story of they could use some factors in the flight plans that get filed to determine if something is IFR versus VFR. But they're still saying at best, maybe they'll capture 80% of the total. So
80% is better than no idea. And I'm just trying to say, are IFR flights increasing over time? And Vector has data from 15. And so that's kind of where I'm trying to think is, who are we increasing IFR flights?
Yeah, IFR is definitely increasing. And I think a proxy to the large aircraft, so you get larger, mid-size, and large aircraft that are exclusively filing IFR, I think is that fleet mix changes, your IFR operations are going to go up. And I think also the Cirrus is also a platform that we've clearly seen operate primarily IFR.
Yep. So I guess
it's safe to say that.
Yeah, so I would like somehow for you guys to think about capturing IFR over time. You know, even if it is 80% accuracy, it's still something.
Okay.
Yeah, it's definitely doable. And if we're only looking to capture if the number is rising or falling, I think even just looking at the tower count that we get is one way that we'll be able to know that.
Okay, so if you could report something like that next time, I'd appreciate that.
Okay, yeah, but if we're looking to have a report that shows like X number of turboprop aircraft went IFR, X number of piston, that's something that we'd have to dive a little deeper into.
Okay. Okay. And at the end, the voluntary curfew deviations, because they had flight by 1, so it wasn't a violation. The one on the 9th and the 10th, was it the same plane or a different plane?
Those might have both been from the same operator.
Okay.
Anything else, Mary?
No. No, thanks. No.
Kat, did I already ask you?
I don't remember, but I don't have any questions.
All right, I had a comment for you guys. I wrote down that the heat map needs a legend, and I think I'm looking at Exhibit 4A. It's got all these dots on it, but I have no idea what they mean.
Yeah, I think we could add that.
4B, 4C means like, you know, I don't speak that language. I don't know what that means.
Well, the heat map, the vendor we used to get this heat map, it doesn't get it like transferred very easily. So I'm taking kind of like snippets of the map and then just pasting them onto the report to show all the areas where those comments come from. We could take a better look at that.
Just, I mean, you have open circles, then you have solid red circles, and then bigger red circles, and then big black circles. So if I can't figure it out, the public can't either.
The larger and the darker, it represents more calls coming from that location. So like a single open dot is probably like one call from that household. And then you see some dots like in Glenshire where it's like you can notice one spot, but it's a little bit darker. That's one household that made several calls. And then you see
Donner, you have a bigger hollow circle. So you don't have to describe them to me right now because I get it in theory, but in the future we should put a legend on it so the general public can figure that out too.
Will do.
That was the extent of it for me. Any public comment?
No public comment.
All right.
Teresa.
Thank you guys. Yes.
We went right into ops and comment, and in terms of Hardy's report, just noting that Jill McClendon was promoted, that's pretty awesome. And she's taking care of leasing now for all the leasing. And, you know, so now that'll be good.
Awesome.
And just wanted to make a note of that.
Thank you. Okay. I think we're done with tab 12. Thank you guys.
Well,
ready to roll? Go ahead.
12B. 12B is got.
You want to take them that way? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So anything on B? You can go first, Mary.
Okay. This was. I think I talked to Kevin, who's going to talk to Hardy about how
we talked. We're going to look at that map.
Great. Thank you. Then in February you said that the contractor said maybe it was going to be 6 months instead of the 2 to 3 years. Is that still on track or has that shifted?
I actually are you talking about the contract for flight procedure development, Mary?
Yeah, Flight Tech.
Yeah, so I actually just got their submission, scope of work, and their fee agreement this morning and started looking at it. It's a very comprehensive document. So I believe that when Kevin and I have time to get together and review that, I do not want to make estimates on their time frame for submittal or approval of the procedures until they can get back to me with the date.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Last month you'd said they were very optimistic that they could get it through fairly quickly.
Yeah, there's some of them, like the Cigna departure, the ones with pretty straightforward criteria, they think they can get through fairly quickly from the time that we authorize them to start work. Others may take us longer. We have a more developed design review process, so those may be longer. But I think by the time we sign that scope agreement, we'll be able to give the board a pretty good understanding of what the time frame for development will be.
For each one. Great.
Yeah.
Okay. So there was that. And then on the Cessna JTA program, I just found it interesting because I pulled out the pro forma. I looked into it. And then that in terms of also the looking at the numbers, the Mountain Lion Aviation Ops and the Sierra Ops, and it's just, Sierra Aero. No. It's just the number of ops tied to, I guess it was in the report, and it was like that Cessna is like 3.2% of our operations in 2020, and both of the trainers at CAT create like 5% of our ops, and that just seemed like spending, I'm glad that it got used 600 hours as compared to 900 hours. I also noticed that Sierra Arrow, for managing it, gets $60 an hour as compared to in the pro forma, it was going to be 25%. And we're charging $170. So they're actually getting a little bit more than 30% of it to manage. And so the pro forma, there's more hours. So, it's making more money, but we're paying more for its maintenance, and then we're going to have to replace the engine and a lot of work coming up on it. So I saw those numbers and thought that's something we all should sort of be aware of.
That's one of the reasons we raised the rate a little bit to $170 an hour and probably 2.5 to 3 years, could be as long as 4 years, we'll have the engine and the prop replacement. And so we're trying to build up a reserve for that.
Good. Okay.
Okay, since you went first, Mary Kat, do you have any comments on the 12B or C?
No comment.
Rick?
How did we come up to $60 an hour? I mean, if they're flying at 600 hours, that's $36,000 to manage the program.
Well, you have
Are they cutting a good deal against us?
No, it's a pretty standard leaseback rate, but I just need to remind everyone, when we did this program, they had to take an aircraft offline that they owned that was generating revenue. And they actually sold it. It's now down at Minden. And so they need to make a profit on this for the whole program to work. It's a fair thing for them to do. So when we did all this, and then when we put the leaseback agreement, that was all approved by the board when we originally launched that program. And so that, they are a for-profit, and they are inclined to be able to generate a little bit of revenue off of it. But there is a lot of work that they do on that plane to manage it, to schedule it, and to do all the work for it. We don't do much with it.
Well, I get
run all that.
Yeah, his calculation of it was pro forma at 600 hours, but it's actually flying 900 hours. So that's 54,000 that we're paying them to do this.
The more hours it flies, the more management there is. Yeah.
Well, my comment is they're for profit, and this program is profitable. And my observation is Sierra Arrow is less good since the phase moved to Texas with Jim Wilkinson. You may not agree with that. You're looking at me perplexed. That is a comment that I'm making.
And you've heard that from others.
How would I know? I don't fly planes.
I know.
Southwest, but I don't think they helped me on that.
Oh.
Is that it, Rick?
That's it.
David?
No comments.
Okay, me either. Any
One thing I
public
can
comment?
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
No public comment.
What were you going to say, Kevin?
I was just going to say I get emails from Jessica all the time from Sierra looking at it. I know they're in Texas, but I know they're still very involved with the business over here. But it's harder when they're not in state. I get what you're saying, but they are involved.
Jessica would come to every board meeting just to keep an eye on us.
She might be in this board meeting. She's not on here, but I would be strongly surprised if she wasn't listening to you right now.
Hi, Jessica.
Okay, no public comment. Let's move on to action items. Number 13. Who's going to lead us on this one?
I'm going to turn that over to Hardy. He and I have worked on this, but ACAT is his function, so I'll give that to him.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go ahead. I'm not going to go through the staff report line by line, but essentially this was a work request after our last board meeting to come back and refine the options available to the board to reformat ACAT. And basically the board was roughly aligned in two areas. Let's modify ACAT in essentially the initiative that David Diamond presented, the airport community team concept, where you'd have a board standing committee And those members would participate with the general manager, who would have different community forums, and then those would roll up and be aligned into a quarterly presentation by the standing board committee back to the full board. And that would essentially meet the function of community outreach, and also, essentially a proxy for the community voice that we want to bring to the airport. So when staff was reviewing this, we also looked closely at the airport community advisory team and its traditional role. And we do agree that it's been around for a long time and it's essentially been unchanged in the 13 or 14 years I've been associated with it. So, it's due for an overhaul, and we think one of the overhauls would, if you chose to stick with the traditional approach to the airport community advisory team, was really to have a higher level of integration with the board directly. So we put in the staff report, 2 annual meetings, a joint meeting between the board of directors and the airport community advisory team that could solve that connection and make sure that there's proper and adequate communication between the 2 groups. And then I will add, I did add one other concept in here, and Kevin and I talked a little bit about it. The third is a civic engagement concept not previously discussed. And this was really an outgrowth of our trying to understand what the board wanted. And essentially what we heard is the board wanted to have a high level discussion with the community on topics it felt was relevant and objectives the board was currently working on. And we thought there is an option where staff could design a civic engagement program, coach people in becoming involved to a higher degree with the airport at a board meeting or any type of our outreach meetings, and really try and interface your constituents directly with the elected officials, which would take out a lot of the filters associated with different community advisory teams. So there wouldn't be any translation or any sort of bias or filter in between your constituents and you, and we would try and enhance that civic engagement to some degree. So it's just a third option. You don't have to consider it. You don't even have to talk about it. We just wanted to put it in the staff report because it seemed commensurate with what the board was talking about accomplishing. I do want to mention 2 diagrams I have in the staff report, and then I'll turn it over to the board chair. One of them was in our effort to understand how we would, the nuts and bolts of working with the airport community team, as Director Diamond suggested, we came up with the kind of a forum type of website engagement where people can add comments and threads, and that could be rolled up underneath those general manager workshops. And then I also put in the staff report a little diagram showing the airport community team. I have to get to it here, let's see. And I'll share that with you really briefly, and then I'll turn it over. But essentially, this is kind of a diagram we did of the quarterly process. You'd have the general managers. Oops, I'm sorry, I didn't share it. There we go. So you have the general managers forum, and then you have the posting in the community forum, Zoom call, and you have all that information, and that essentially flows month over month into month 2. If you skipped a month, that would be just fine. You could still have it on a quarterly basis. And then all of this information goes to the standing committee and the general manager. They synthesize that and they bring it back at a quarterly board meeting for airport community team presentation. And then that information essentially would be rolled up and a response would be developed back to the airport community team. And you would go ahead and you would put that back into the community forum web portal. You could also review it at the next meeting, just like you would a traditional meeting, and have a standing report out. So here's the board's report on everything that we've handled this quarter. So that's kind of the information and the outreach flow of the airport community team. And with that, I will stop sharing and open it up for questions or turn it over to the board as you may see fit.
All right. Let's see, where are we here? Looks like Kat, you're first. Any questions or thoughts?
I'll be down in a minute.
So the diagram you just showed us, is that option number 1 or is it option number 3 mixed with 1?
That is actually option. Let me get to my staff report. I'm sorry. Option number 1.
Yeah, it's one.
Yeah, it's option number one. Option number two, essentially, go ahead, I'm sorry. It's option number one.
Okay, so it just, it seems so complicated. You know what I mean? I mean, I guess when you diagram anything out, it makes it look more so, but,
Emily, can you mute Director Stevens for us, please?
It just feels like it's so formal. And yeah, I guess
the forum, I understand what you're saying. The forum is really a much more informal part that would have a running dialogue associated with it. And again, this is just staff's attempt to summarize or synthesize an initiative that Director Diamond brought forward. So we're happy to change it, simplify it, modify it. We were just trying to put some operational framework around it so the board could see how it would actually work. And so that was just our kind of first.
So in any one of these meetings, you would have the general manager and you would have the two board members who were assigned to this. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, you'd have the general manager, you'd have, Hardy's group, and then you'd have, you can have members of the standing committee attend the monthly forums, but you can't have both of them, is what I understand from Josh when we were talking about this. So, and it could be topic driven, where if you're talking about one topic that the group has been working on and a board member's been involved with that, they could attend. And then if you're going to switch to a different topic, they could leave the meeting and the other one could come in. Is that right, Josh?
Yeah, that's right. So the forum could meet with the general manager without it being Brown Acted, but if we had both members of the standing committee, then that would be a Brown Act meeting. It'd be agendized, and the forum could attend, but it really would be a Brown Act meeting of the standing committee.
With two members?
With two members, yes.
It becomes a standing committee rather than.
Yeah, the idea is only to have a standing committee on that third month, or to have a Brown Act meeting on the third month. I think the first two are just supposed to be, informal, kind of, hey, let's get everyone together and talk.
So, as general manager, what do you think of it, Kevin?
Well,
I think
it has a lot of merit. I think it's an interesting idea, and there's obviously one of the thoughts was we would have topic areas that we could bring up on a monthly basis and say, hey, this month we're going to talk about land use, or we're going to talk about flight procedures, or we're going to talk about noise and annoyance, and you do like 20 minutes of information and education and informing, and put out a topic and get some conversation going, but then also have a time, maybe the second half of the meeting that's open forum. What are the issues that you're facing? Also, if there's things the board wants input on, we bring those things forward and say, hey, what does the group think about this, that, or the other? And we start gathering that information, and then we keep carrying it forward. We should note that it is a little different than the traditional ACAT format. ACAT was never intended to be a let's go find what the community thinks about this topic.
Right.
ACAT was always supposed to be a research and development kind of a, hey, let's get some people together and talk about ideas to address issues. It wasn't necessarily meant to, hey, what does the community think about this topic or that topic? And it's kind of gone back and forth in that a little bit.
Right. So I guess what it kind of comes back to at the end of the day, and this was mentioned in the report, is that what this board wants the community team to be? Do we want to get rid of the R&D piece of it and reformat it into a community outreach type thing? I don't feel like we ever really had any clarity on that decision.
That's a really great question. Who wants to go first? Rick is actually next in line to answer that. Rick.
I think Emily's muted.
All right, we'll come back to Rick. David? You're muted, Rick.
You want me to go?
Yeah, we'll come back to Rick.
Okay, cool. I do have some comments and a few questions on this. One of our 2021 goals is to reinvent, improve, and enhance the district's community engagement process. In light of that, I'm very, very happy to see this, because I think this really specifically addresses that. The online forum concerns me for a few reasons. First of all, I think, as we see on Facebook and Nextdoor, that people will say something in an online forum that they will not say when they're speaking. And I think it takes a little of that personal interaction away, and those people who do want to just spout out something will say that. And if somebody has a real problem, I'd rather hear them explain their problem than to type some little curt response to something that we're supposed to somehow infer meaning from. So that's a concern for me. I also feel that it could alienate some people. We have members remaining on ACAT now whom I feel would not be comfortable in an online forum because they're not as versed in computer stuff and that kind of mentality. So my concern is that some members of the public might not want to participate in there because they might find it to be confusing, or they're not really sure how they're supposed to act in that kind of a thing. The net result of that, which concerns me, is that we end up with parallel conversations. There's stuff said in the online forum that's not said in the Zoom meeting, and because you've got people in the Zoom meeting who are not on the online forum, they don't know the reference that's being brought up. And I think it becomes very confusing because we have multiple conversations going on with all of the participants. And especially if we assume that there are going to be more participants, that could be super confusing. It's very expensive. It's a big upfront investment. And I kind of look at it, as much as I champion the idea that we're doing this, I still look at it like we're testing this. We're going to see if this works or not. We're going to give this 6 months or 9 months or a year or however much time we're going to give it and see if it actually benefits us and benefits the community. So the online forum to me is a pretty big spend up front for that experiment. And I would say that keeping it on the back burner, but letting the ACT participants themselves decide if they would like an online forum. After we've been going at this for 6 months, bring that to the group and just say, would you like this? Would this benefit you? And let them kind of decide if it's a benefit. Because otherwise our startup costs for a revised ACAT are extremely low. That just jacks them up kind of a bit. Those are my thoughts on option one. Just generally, if we took the complexity of the online forum away from the discussion, I think it's really good. I do have the other question I have, which kind of applies. It's just like in that flow chart thing. I just thought in the case of simplicity that if a board member and a board member should be at the meeting, I think the fact that a board member and Kevin is at the meeting really says a lot to the community. The fact that kind of a commitment is there, that board member would just come back to the board in the member announcements and just update on what happened in ACT that month, so that the board could actually decide, well, hey, maybe that's something we should agendize for next month and really get on the conversation, rather than waiting quarterly to have that discussion. So that was something I thought. On the option two, and this goes to what Kat was just asking there, we've often said that the low-hanging fruit with regard to ACAT's original mission has long since been picked. And we are at a point where if we're thinking of ACAT as a research and development arm of the board to look into community projects or methods to decrease noise and annoyance, I think that's a big ask to ask of just 6 community members who are not versed in research and development or aeronautics or any kind of a science behind the noise and annoyance reduction. So I feel like if we do want an R&D branch from the board, that we might be better off serving that with professionals who are versed in that, who can actually, here's what's happened at 20 other airports, and here's the science behind this prop or that prop or this or whatever. And I think that naturally is why ACAT became what it was, because ACAT basically ran out of ideas for decreasing noise and annoyance. And I don't think that the board, at least in my experience, Kat might say differently about this because she was on ACAT while I was on ACAT. We never got any directives from the board on like what you wanted us to do to decrease noise and annoyance. We were fairly self-propelled in that iteration of ACAT. In fact, if I remember correctly, the only thing that I remember ever being asked by the board was to review the purchasing policy 311. And other than that, I don't remember that we were ever considered an R&D branch from the board. Then going on to option 3, honestly, I have to admit I was confused by this one. I wasn't really sure how this differed from then people just showing up at a board meeting and offering public comment. There was a comment in there about like the board, the civic engagement plan from staff, and I just wondered, like, while I love that idea, couldn't the civic engagement plan just sort of support option number 1 in encouraging people to participate in that forum? So just in summary, it's in line with one of our goals. I think it is a great step forward. I would like to treat it like an experiment for a year. And the online app, the forum part of it, I'd rather bring that in later if the ACT membership feels like it will benefit them.
Well, can I just a couple questions, David, for you? So are you thinking that if you look at Hardy's diagram, the diagram he made, you get rid of the community forums, bring that in later, and then essentially eliminate column month 2 and month 3, and so just every month you have a forum with topics, and then we hold that conversation, and then we synthesize it and bring it back to the board each month? Or would you still propose a standing committee?
I mean, I think that the standing committee, there's value in that, especially for the folks who are concerned about Brown Act guidance over this. So I appreciate it from that perspective, but I kind of think, like, in terms of, I have to admit, I thought that if there was 2 people on the standing committee, I thought they could both attend the Zoom meetings. I didn't realize that only one of them can attend. So, but that's kind of unfortunate, but if that's the way it is, that's the way it is. But I was kind of just thinking that there would be the board members and Kevin in the Zoom meetings, and that after the meeting that maybe the 3 of them would debrief on what happened there with their interpretation, and then just bring that to the next board meeting. And then the board at that time could say, okay, sounds great, keep going, or hey, that's a good point, we should agendize that for discussion next month. But if we can only do it with 1 board member in the meeting at a time, I think that's still fine. You know, it's like if you've got 2 people on the standing committee, 1 goes to 1 meeting, 1 goes to another meeting, or it's divided if they happen to, if they have to be participant in that. I mean, I love the idea of multiple board members be attending or participating in this, even if not at the same time. But that we just kind of debrief more, especially if there's something that's brought up in ACT that seems particularly pressing. I hate to kind of like let it just stew for a quarter until it's discussed by the standing committee and then brought to the board, because then we're looking at 4, perhaps 5 months until we have action to actually show ACT on something that was brought up. And I would just like us to be able to be a little bit more nimble on responding to anything that's brought up, whether it's a complaint or an idea.
Well, I think, and I can see Josh. Oh, go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, just to clarify, I apologize. Director Diamond, we absolutely can have both members of the standing committee attend those forums. We'll just need to make sure that those ACT forums are agendized as meetings of the standing committee. And that's pretty easy. We just need to make sure the agenda is posted in advance, and then have a public comment process, which we would anyways, because of course it's intended to be a way for the public to provide input. So we certainly could. It would just be one extra step of posting an agenda of that standing committee.
So Josh, to ask you about that, so to me, that doesn't seem like a big deal. The only concern that I would have with regard to a Brown Act open meeting format is that at some point in time, we do want the participants to be able to speak freely. so it wouldn't be like we're going to talk, now is there any public comment on this topic? Okay, public comments closed, we're moving on. I think that would defeat the purpose of that open dialogue. But if we were somehow able to agendize it and have the, the two board members there with Kevin, we, especially as Kevin just described, where one half of the meeting is the airport sort of disseminating information and educating and doing all that, and the second half of the meeting is open for comment. If we could do that and make it legal, I think that would be fine. I don't think that would be a burden.
We absolutely can. The reason we're, a little bit more formal with how we handle public comment in these types of meetings is just given some structure and the amount of work that the board needs to kind of work through. But in a workshop type meeting, that's how I would see this forum functioning. We can integrate public comment into the discussion. And, to your point, Director Diamond, there could be a presentation and then, a workshop, or it could be, structured in any different way.
Okay, so it could be as simple as like the agenda gets posted and the agenda says, item 1, airport talks about flight procedures. Item 2, open discussion.
Yep. The only thing is we would need to add an agenda item 3, which would be public comment on items not on 1 or 2. Right, just so that there is that catch-all that if someone wishes to come, they can make a comment about something that's outside, but that doesn't have to happen at the beginning. It can happen at the end. And that makes it a little bit easier if some members of the community aren't going to want to stick around for 30 minutes of public comment at the beginning about things that aren't on the agenda.
Oh, okay, I love that. I think that's doable, and I think it's understandable.
Oh, quick question. Would you recommend that we have counsel at those meetings as well?
No, I really, so this will be a lawyer answer, so I apologize. It's one of those where it depends on the topic. I think there may be some topics where there's value in having us attend. I think there are other, other meetings where, you probably don't need to have us there. I have a number of clients that have standing committees of their board. Those standing committees meet regularly on a monthly basis and don't have us attend.
I have a question about the standing committee. It's not like an ad hoc. Are there 2 defined people that will always be part of it, or can it fluctuate? Like 1 month it would be
rotated.
Month it would be Kat and Rick.
To make sure we don't end up having conversations that involve a quorum of the board, we do need to have a little bit of structure, Director Hetherington. So what I would recommend is we pick some way, if we're going to rotate it, that where we define that rotation. And what a lot of agencies will do is like an annual basis, right? On an annual basis, they'll rotate the committee assignments. Anything less than that, and we start running the risk of inadvertently having a discussion, because we're swapping folks out in the committee of a quorum of the full board.
That was our suggestion. You could rotate it annually or biannually, maybe every 6 months, but some type of a structure like that we would create.
Okay, that's it. Nothing more for me. Thank you. I appreciate the effort on that.
Okay. Mary.
Then I guess I do see the value of it being, I thought Hardy's comment, is it, and Kat brought it up as well, is it R&D or is it community outreach? And I really do think it's time for the outreach. And I'm really thrilled that Kevin would be involved. And how this is evolving in the conversation with 2 people, 2 board members, so it's agendized, so it does have minutes, it does have Brown Act issues. I do think having the monthly feedback to the board is very valuable, because particularly in the summertime, because that's when people are interested. I see value in this because there's education on both sides. It's like we've had comments come in and say, I'm in this neighborhood and we have a no-fly zone. Well, that's an education component for the public. And, so we can address those things on both sides. There is a concern by some that it could get unwieldy, but we're all about community outreach, and is that a bad thing? So there's still minutes. It would be Zoom and the movie, and it would be recorded through Zoom, so that can always be accessed. The 5 monthly 6, it would there's really the cost to the district at this time would be Kevin's time in the Zoom. And that's about it. And the minutes, because Lauren would be taking minutes. But I really like, Kevin, your idea of spending the first 20 minutes on education, on where
That
they
topic.
can, or on greenhouse gas, or on land management, pick something. I think that's really a great idea. But the complexity of having the I guess I have that same concern about Nextdoor and Facebook, because boy, that can heat up on certain issues. And the idea of let's just keep it in a, and it's kind of an hour defined this is an hour for you to, it's like an open house. And I guess one of the big HOAs in town is doing general manager meets with, turns on the Zoom once a month, and people can call in with stuff. And it I think has a lot of merit that way. And I do think a monthly feedback is a good point.
So good. I wanted to follow up with Mary on, and I've heard you and David maybe talk about this, that maybe you don't need a standing committee at all. And I know we've talked about the Brown Act, and there's people, last meeting, there's a lot of concern about, are we skirting the Brown Act? But if you look at, when we look at the airport community, the process diagram that Hardy put together, if you just take the one column, month one, of a general manager act forum, where we have topics, and I can program those out, for multiple months ahead. And then you have the Zoom call, and then the roll up. And you as a board can decide monthly in our board meetings who's going to attend those meetings. Then that's not a standing committee. Right. Josh, correct me if I'm wrong. We haven't created a standing committee. We just have you attending my meeting that I would set up, and I'd write a policy instruction around it, and then we would wrap up, and whoever attended that meeting, with me, because I do agree with what David said is, yes, people want to talk to me, and they do. I talk to people all the time, but they also want to talk to you. And so having a combination of senior management in there, along with a couple of board members, I think will go a long way with some folks that want to have more dialogue with us. Any thoughts on that, Josh? Is that a Brown Act issue that if we do it that way?
I agree with you. We could definitely structure it that way.
And then two of us could attend.
Yeah. We decide ahead of time when, who would do that.
I have a quick question on that. But I don't think you could have two members that crossed topic lines of discussion. So you couldn't have two members do greenhouse gas and then flip it and have two members do different greenhouse gas and then come together as a board and discuss that. Is that right, Josh?
Yeah, we would want to be careful about that, Hardy. That's a good point. We would want to make sure we didn't inadvertently get into a situation where we were facilitating a discussion between three board members through swapping folks out. But outside of that, manageable.
Just looking at the topics we cover, we could manage that.
I just wanted to add one thing, because I was thinking about this as Mary was talking, that even if we have a standing committee and it's Brown Act, Kevin, your participation is something that the current ACAT doesn't have, that's for sure. But the rest of it, the minutes and everything else, is what the current ACAT is requiring also. And there is a $50,000 per year savings on ACT because it does not have the ACAT budget. And you're not having to do that, and you're not paying the participants. So there is a financial savings to us in doing this, which I think is worth considering.
And one of the things I like about it is a lot of people will talk to me when I'm at the grocery store, at a ball game, or out skiing, or on a walk, and they are terrified to get up at a podium. But they would tie into a Zoom meeting, and this opens that door for them to feel comfortable to express an opinion. I think there's a lot of value in that.
Now, I'm going to throw something out there that I may regret, but I'm going to do it anyway, because that's what we're all about. There's no reason you couldn't do both of these things. If there are board members that are uncomfortable, we haven't heard from Rick and Teresa, obviously, and maybe more from Kat on this, but if there's a desire to keep ACAT as that R&D and keep seeing if there's things we can tackle, there's no reason we couldn't do both of these things. Now, I'd have to look, and my staff's going to start sending me nastygrams on email, but we may have to look at our staffing and see if we can support, both of those things, because there's some extra workload with that. But I have no problem tilting up a monthly, Zoom meeting and talking. I love that stuff. I'd be happy to do that.
Open house.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the idea of giving it a whirl for a year and see if new ideas come out, if somebody's not afraid to come to a meeting and speak up. And education can work both ways.
Rick?
I think one of the problems with ACAT was that the board didn't pay much attention to it. And when we ever tried to get meetings, joint ACAT meetings, we never got them done. Now, I think we got a new board who's more interested in it. But I think the important thing is to have the board pay attention to ACAT. Now, maybe this is a way. I'm willing to try almost anything. I just think the old ACAT got lost in other issues other than aviation, noise and annoyance, etc. And it got sidetracked. So, this is complicated, and I agree, we had to try it. And so I'm in support of doing something. The question is what? That's it.
All right, well, my thoughts, I like ACAT the way that it was, but I seem to be in the minority, so I will support going down the path of trying something new, because we can always change our minds later.
Mhm.
So, do we have any kind of consensus? Can anyone sum this up for us? Kevin?
Yeah, I had to mute because my phone started blowing up with all my staff telling me, "What are you doing?" No, that was fine. Lauren volunteered, so she's ready to jump in. She said, no. It's I think what I'm hearing is maybe try this and start simple, and then we can complicate it if we want to. But what I'd like to do is maybe come back next month with the policy instruction that kind of lays this out, that the board can stamp, that essentially sets up an ACT form, and we'll maybe play around with the names of it a little bit, that has that's run by the general manager with obviously support from my AVCOM team and others on staff, where we can generate some topics. And I'm going to talk about an idea of what we call I'm going to steal it from the town manager, from Jennifer. It's called a bike. You have a bike rack where we rack ideas as they come up that we can't maybe tackle right this now, and I'm going to put that on the rolling agenda. There's going to be a bike rack on the bottom where we have all these ideas. What we could do is then I could schedule out these forums with these topics where we as a staff will do 20 minutes of information and then get feedback on it that is of interest to the board, and then have the second half of the meeting of just conversation. What are you seeing? What are you hearing? What do you want us to consider? And then as part of the agenda item 18 that we have every month, you as a board can select who's going to attend those. And then you'll know the topics ahead of time so that we can make sure we're Brown Act compliant. I can put that in a policy instruction and bring that back and then have you take action on it next month if you'd like.
Sounds good to me.
It sounds like a plan.
That's a little simpler than what we've been doing, and it may be more effective. So
great. Give it a go.
So, are we going to simultaneously run ACAT, the current ACAT?
I don't think so.
No, just
I think we're going to try this, and then we would go back if we're not getting the results we hoped, then we could go back and revisit the ACAT model that we had before.
Okay, quick question. Should I invite the current ACAT membership to transition over, and should I take the candidates who applied for selection with ACAT and kind of put together an offering for that group as a whole?
I think Hardy.
I think so, for sure.
Yeah, I think so too.
They're all strong participants, so I would encourage them to participate in this.
And what I tell them, Hardy, is that we're going to come forward with with a policy instructor that's going to explain this so they can see what it is we're talking about. But I think, the message we want to convey is we really want their participation and help in this.
Okay, great,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay.
Okay, any,
There's some public comment too.
any
Oh,
last
sorry.
board member comments before we go to public comment? Okay, any public comment, Lauren?
Yeah, we have two. The first one's from Lynn Larson, current ACAT member. I have reviewed the proposals for the future of ACAT. Options 1 and 3 appear to be management nightmares, requiring a lot of attention and doomed for failure. I cannot support any plan that does not require a committee that spends taxpayers' money to not adhere to the Brown Act. The community deserves transparency and accountability. There is a cost here. I believe that ACAT has lost its focus, that being, quote, nuisance noise reduction, unquote. If certain people want to expand ACAT to include a broader membership to represent the unrepresented, or so we think, community members in the airport district, then that should be considered. I believe ACAT members, as well as the board, should work together to address the current mission statement. What is it are we trying to do? What do we need to do? What is the real goal here? To satisfy a few cranky folks? I have been a resident of this community for over 20 years. The airport has come a long way towards a positive relationship with the local community. However, my experience tells me that very few people outside those I could support option 2, but I believe it is not complete. Respectfully, Lynn Larson. Second one from Linda Russin. I appreciate the openness of the board to provide a forum to the community. I think it is great to provide an educational topic and then allow the public an opportunity to provide comments in an informal format. Thank you for the time and attention you are giving to this subject. That's it.
Okay. Thank you for the public comments, and I think that's it. If anyone has anything else, we'll move on.
I guess the only other thing is in terms of outreaching to the previous ACAT members, but also to some of the commenters over time would be useful so that they know this is happening. It could go out in an e-blast, something so that people who have been monitoring the airport know that this is going to be starting.
Yeah, I think we can make a pretty decent and robust outreach initiative out of it, because I think it's exciting to talk about, and the changes I think are going to precipitate a lot of dialogue. I've heard things on KTK radio already and other places. So I think we'll try and get the message out far and wide, and we will include the previous commenters in that messaging.
Great, thank you.
Yep, thanks. Good conversation. So let's go to action item number 14. Review and acceptance of land management plan.
Yeah, I'm going to turn this over to Matt Wacker and David Shaw from Balance Hydrologics, and they're the prime consultant on developing our lands management plan. It's a very dense document. It's very comprehensive, as you know. You've seen it. It's been posted on our website, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about, before I turn it over to the consultant, we had a really lengthy stakeholder input process where we had people come out to the airport. We did a survey. We talked with them at length, basically our neighbors, people in the Martis Valley and beyond. We got help from organizations like Tahoe Donner, who also did a lands management plan recently. And all of that information got rolled up and put into the draft lands management plan before you. And essentially what the document is designed to do is give you a complement of different action steps to complete the objectives, the conservation objectives associated with all the different land types that the airport has. And some of our land is used for aeronautical purposes. Some of it is open space. Some of it is public access. Some of it is nothing. Some of it has our navigational aids, like our beacon towers. So each one of those areas will require a different type of treatment to meet the objectives of that type of land use. And so I'm going to turn it over to Matt and Dave and let them walk you through some slides. We really wanted to focus on the discussion, the Q&A session for the board. So Matt and Dave are going to spend about 10 to 12 minutes going through the slides. And then if you want to earmark your questions on different slides, we can go back to them. And then I would mention also that this is really a great guiding document as a placeholder when you do your budget development. So if you have an objective for doing different things that you've identified in the plan, you'd integrate that into the budget, and the plan will help you develop a budget and use that budget to pick whatever course of treatment we may have on our land. So it could be forest fuels reduction, it could be water quality, it could be access, it could be open space, or it could be trails. And that's outlined in the document, and I know Matt's going to talk more about that. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Matt.
Thanks, Hardy. Yeah, and thank you, everyone. Thanks for having us here this evening. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. I've had others comment sometimes that my mic on my camera can go in and out, so hopefully you all can hear me fine. And I can't see the presentation. I assume you all can, but I have a copy of it up here, so I can just step through it without having to see it on my screen. So
Matt, really quickly.
Sorry,
we're going to Emily's going to pull your presentation up, and you can have her forward the slide, but your microphone is it sounds a little muffled.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure I'll be able to do it. It just comes and goes. It's like a weird in and out thing that I can't figure out. I've had tech guys look at it and can't figure it out. So
that's a little better right there.
Yeah, that's
good. It's using. Yeah, okay. This day and age, all this remote everything creates all sorts of interesting challenges sometimes. So, okay. So yeah, as Hardy said, we work with the airport district to come up with this land management plan. It is a dense document, and it sounds like you all have had a chance to review it and take a look at it. So Dave and I'll just spend a few minutes going over kind of the highlights. We're not going to delve down into any real meaty details on anything, but we'll sort of hopefully leave that for the Q&A piece when you all can ask questions. So if you want to go ahead and jump to the next slide, please. So this just sort of outlines the overview of the plan and kind of the guiding arching statement for how it was developed. Like many of these documents, this is really a kind of a forum to organize goals and priorities for the airport district and its lands. So we didn't do a lot of original, study or data gathering or data collection, things like that. Mostly what Dave and I and our teams did was pull together all of the work that's already been done for the airport district and its lands, or your stakeholder groups, and put all that together in one location so it's all accessible and available, and then try to come up with some goals and objectives and specific tasks based on that information. So this just shows kind of this overarching statement that we developed with Hardy. It talks about the main components of the plan, and then we'll just step through each of these briefly, with the exception of the regulatory setting. We're not going to get into that too much on the presentation because it's pretty dense, but it gives just a very detailed overview of all the different laws and regulations. So yeah, sorry, go ahead. Next slide, please. So this just gives a quick overview of the planning process. As Hardy said, we had a public stakeholder meeting in fall 2019 where it was pretty well attended. We solicited goals, input, priorities from different community members, stakeholders, local government agencies, and based on that meeting came up with a bullet list of 5 sort of priorities for the LMP to address. So those are the 5 that are bolded there, and you'll see us talk about those again later in the presentation as we work through it. The LMP was drafted and submitted to the airport district in fall of 2020, and here we are today going over kind of the final review with the board members. Go ahead, next slide, please. So this just gives a rundown of some of the background documents that we looked at. As I said, there's so much information that's already been gathered both by the airport district and your, partner organizations for the area. Dave and I and our teams didn't have to do a lot of original data collection. There's so much out there to pull from already. So this just highlights some of those documents. There's more in the document itself, and there also is an appendix that Dave and his group at Balance put together that it's kind of an annotated bibliography of some of these documents and how they relate to the airport district and its lands. So you can go ahead, next slide, please. We'll just go through a few maps. Again, some of you are probably all of you are familiar with these, but we'll just step through these pretty quickly. But this just gives you an overview of the land covered by the LMP. So it's pretty much all the open space properties are primarily the undeveloped properties owned by the airport district. It's not every property owned by the airport district. So it doesn't deal with the actual operational facility of the airport itself. It deals with just the land surrounding it. Ponderosa Golf Course and Martis Valley Estates next to it. The Alder Hill Beacon, where your navigational beacon is located, and then the Wattle Ranch and Jones properties, or Elizabethtown Meadows it's called, just to the east of the airport and Martis Valley. Go ahead, next slide. As Hardy said, one of the things we try to do is come up with management zones. So we took a look at the land and tried to figure out, okay, kind of what's best suited for where. And largely this is based on existing use of these properties. So the bright pink, for example, is intensive recreational areas. So this area obviously corresponds to where the campground is located, where the glider facility is located. The golf course is obviously also developed recreational facility. We have some other areas, these open space area pretty much is everything that's sort of left over, for lack of a better term. So you can see it's mostly all of Wattle Ranch and the Elizabethtown or Jones properties, as well as a big chunk of the land around the airport itself and around the Alder Hill Beacon. Developed areas are mostly roads and other infrastructure that exists within the lands themselves. And then we have these aquatic resource protection areas, which are all of the creeks, meadows, streams, other aquatic resource areas, dry lake, that are located on the properties. Go next slide, please. Spend a little bit of time talking about vegetation and fuels management, because that was such an important issue related to public safety with community members in the airport. So this just shows the vegetation types on the properties. Again, the greens are forested types, obviously the types that are of bigger concern from a fuels management and wildfire standpoint. Next slide, please. This shows the fire history. Some of you might be interested in this. So this shows where there have been wildfires around the airport in recent history, going back to the turn of the century. And the interesting to note about this is there really has not been a fire in this area since the 70s. So a lot of the vegetation conditions that you see, especially on the undeveloped forested properties, are an artifact of that condition where there hasn't been a lot of wildfire, and the need for the airport district really to actively manage a lot of those lands to control fuel accumulation and mitigate wildfire risk. Next slide. This is a map that we pulled from the town's fire protection district, one of their plans they just came out with a couple years ago, and it's a little bit counterintuitive, but what it's showing is what they call the resistance to control. And so yellows, oranges, and reds mean that there is a higher resistance to control a wildfire. That can be an artifact of vegetation conditions, or it can be an artifact of development and infrastructure. So basically blues are areas there would be less resistance to control a wildfire, or the wildfire would be easier to control, either because it's less intense, or there's no fuel there, or there's something else going on that makes it easier to manage the wildfire risk, whereas yellows and oranges and reds are harder to control, typically because it's an open vegetation condition that, again, the reds are areas obviously that are in the town or closer to developed infrastructure, where it's even more critical to control a wildfire. Go ahead, next slide, please. This is an example of some of the fuels management activities that are already occurring on the district's land. So this is pretty much only happening, as I understand it right now, at Wattle Ranch. So this shows from the Wattle Ranch management plan that's a couple years old now, outlines some of the fuel management treatments in different zones, some of the treatments that have either been occurring in the recent past or are planned for the future up through this year and next year, I believe, is how far out that plan outlined its different management activities. So this just gives you an overview of what's kind of happening on the district's lands now. And when we get into some of the activities and tasks a little bit later, we'll see that we've got a goal or a task in there to do this same kind of thing for the other open space or forested properties that the district owns and manages. Go ahead, next slide. Okay, and so for a couple slides here, I'm going to flip it over to Dave and let him talk a bit.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, everyone. I'll just keep rolling through these maps. This one highlights the drainages on the open space lands. Of course, there's the major drainages, like we call Dry Lake Creek, East Martis Creek, Middle Martis Creek. Those are shown in blue. And then through analysis of high-resolution topo data collected by a bunch of partner agencies for the area, we also had the computer basically tell us where natural flow paths might occur. Those are some of the smaller red and orange drainages with smaller watershed areas. And the other thing that we have basically done with this, we've got some hydrology data on the major creeks, but by looking at where the high resolution topography would intersect roads and things like that, we would identify places where there could be erosion issues, water quality impairments, and then ground truth that a little bit in the field, and then identified, just called out some of the places where we would recommend looking at that on an annual basis, just to look at the condition of roads, and especially some of these potential hot spots where there's an intersection of a drainage path with a road. Overall, it looked like, again, with the forest treatment work, there's the roads are pretty well managed, and drainage is pretty well managed. Next slide. Recreation is also a category that was looked at as part of the plan. Primarily, number one in terms of the golf course, but a large recreation component that we looked at was just linkages to existing trail networks within the airport's lands, and then of course linkages to bikeways or dirt trails regionally, and working with some of the other agencies and groups that are building out those trails. And then of course the recreation in terms of the glider park and camping that occurs adjacent to the runway on the open space parcels. Next slide. So now we'll sort of transition into a quick run through of the goals that came out of the plan through working with the stakeholders and Hardy and folks that he consulted with. So I'll just go through a few of these and then turn it back over to Matt. First off, public safety is pretty first and foremost among the goals here. That involves really emergency access, fuels management, and a part of fuels management is forest management for health and resiliency to climate change, drought periods, and maintaining wildlife habitat. And then again, with the roads, with drainage, there's a tie-in to making sure that there is emergency vehicle access. Next slide. Another goal is to protect and improve water quality. That goes back to minimizing erosion, there's a regulatory framework to protect waterways from fine sediment, and then also looking at the golf course in terms of nutrients, pesticide management, and general water quality management from the golf course. And then we also outlined response to fire, making sure that there's a post-fire response plan in place so that there can be appropriate water quality or other infrastructure protection after a wildfire. Next. Public use and outreach relates to recreation, also educational and public awareness opportunities. The goal objectives that come out of this goal would be develop outreach materials, and then of course those linkages to trails regionally, both bikeways or just dirt trail use of open spaces. I'll turn it back over to Matt here to go through the rest of the goals.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Go ahead and jump to the next slide. I'll wrap it up here so we can take Q&A. So yeah, another priority area was natural and cultural resources protection. Obviously there's, in addition to the public safety benefits and open space benefits and recreational benefits, there's some important habitat benefits that the open space lands around the airport provide. So we want to be sure to emphasize that, maintain the ecological condition and function of those lands. Again, sort of maintain the species that are on there, if you look at a lot of these tasks, I mean, one thing to really emphasize about this is this doesn't mean these are things that airports will do itself. These are things that airports will support and work with collaborators to do, if there's an interest in doing that. So something like inventory of biological resources doesn't mean that the district is going to be out, counting plants and birds and wildlife. It means that if Audubon or somebody comes to airports and says, hey, we'd like to do our Christmas bird count, it's something you would support and encourage and, take the data that they give you and use that to inform your management of your land. Go ahead and jump to the next one, please. And then the last element really deals with economic development. One thing that did come out of the public stakeholder process was a desire to accommodate, where feasible, where appropriate economic uses of the open space lands. So we did sort of fold this in there as the last chapter and the last bit of the goals and objectives and tasks to kind of deal with that. And again, there wasn't a lot of specifics about what exactly this might look like, but it's basically accounting for the fact that there may be a need or a desire to use the airport's lands for some sort of reasonable economic development. And so that's something that would at least be considered and supported where it's appropriate. Go ahead and jump to the next and last slide here. And then, so of course, the important question is, how does all this get paid for, right? So one thing we did do, if you notice, as we flip through the slides, we did try to assign a time horizon or a time frame to a lot of those tasks. Or are they things that would occur annually and be expected to occur pretty frequently? Or are they things that would occur kind of periodically or episodically as needed? So working with Hardy, we came up with some costs, some probable kind of order of magnitude estimates of cost to do all of this. So that's the cost that you see there, between $227,000, $257,000 a year for all these activities. And again, these aren't necessarily all costs that would be paid for by the district. They could be costs paid for by partners, other groups. Some of these restoration actions or water quality actions that we talked about. Those are things where, you could partner and have partnered with the Watershed Council or other local groups to help fund those through grants or other sources of funding to do those sorts of projects. So it's not necessarily expected that all this money is going to be paid for by airports. And as Hardy said, this is really just something to be used as a placeholder for your budgeting process and to try to determine priorities and to try to, triage things from year to year to determine what gets done or what doesn't get done based on funding availability and priorities. So that's it for our quick run through. And yeah, Dave and I are happy to take any questions you all might have.
Could I mention one quick piece? Thank you. Excellent presentation. I just wanted to mention the airport district and the board of directors particularly have just been an outstanding supporter of all the airport lands, starting with the work on Woodell Ranch. And I think the entire stakeholder process really brought out that the board has been a leader in local land ownership and management over the years. So I'd like to commend this board and the previous board for spending so much time and contribution to that, because it really came out in that process. And then also the partnerships, Sugar Pine Foundation, Truckee Donner Land Trust, Truckee River Watershed Council have been three key players in helping us essentially meet those goals that the board has directed us to do on those lands. So when we talk about getting the work done, it's kind of can't happen without our partners. And sometimes we share a conservation easement and ownership back and forth with the land trust. So they're kind of integral in that. I just wanted to mention that going forward.
If I could add one more thing to that, the last slide that talked about the funding, one of the things that we will do from a staff perspective, obviously, we're charged with implementing this, is that we will come forward every year with a proposal. So when we're doing the budget process, we will have some projects, and as they said, it may be partnering with the Watershed Council or Truckee Fire or other groups on some of these projects, but we'll come forward with the priorities for that year that you, from a staff perspective, recommend. And then you, as part of the budget process, the board will decide, if we want to fund that or how we want to work.
Thank you. So, board, where do we want to start? Let's start with David Diamond. Questions, thoughts, comments?
This is so far out of my area of expertise that I can say I looked at the plan. The plan seemed well written. I learned stuff about our process that I didn't even realize. I can't even imagine guessing that there might be something wrong or incomplete in it. I think you did a great job on it. I appreciate the. I've got nothing else to say about it.
Okay, Mary, you're next.
Yeah, I have the hard copy of it. I looked through it. I was there when we purchased Wattle Ranch because, and the intention there was to not have 1,500 more homes at the end of the runway. And that's been a good thing. And we've spent a lot of money clearing it out. And it's been a showpiece, I guess, to the local fire department and CAL FIRE to show what it's supposed to look like. You can really see it in the winter when you can see snow between the trees.
Yeah.
Compared to all around it where all you see is the green, the mass of trees. And the intention there was to, anybody threw a cigarette out, that it wouldn't go right into Juniper Hills and Glenshire. So that's been a really great thing. And I think that maintaining our properties, we have, according to the report, 2199 acres that we own and another 151 that we have the conservation easement on the Jones property. So, when you look at the money over this many acres, it's well worth it. And if, so I think it's great to have overall, it's kind of like having the facilities management plan and the pavement management plan. It's just another thing that helps give us guidance year on year about what to do. And when we first set up that forest management plan to do that, we knew it was a chunk of change. Placer County and all the state alphabet groups put in 20-something million, and we put in $3 million to buy Wattle. And every year we're putting money into it, but it's a good thing. So thank you for putting this together. I think it gives us guidance.
Thank you. Kat, thoughts and questions?
Well, I have to disagree that it's like the pavement management plan, because this was a whole lot more interesting to me. I thought it was fascinating. I loved every bit of it. I learned a ton. And being on the grant side of giving out money for Nature Fund, I've heard for years about how the airport is helping the land trust manage this land, Elizabethtown or Wattle Ranch or this and that. And so I've always heard that that's been the case, but it's really nice to have a document that just lays everything out exactly what's happening.
Thank you. Rick?
I totally support the land management of our property. However, I have one concern. On page 89, although it says 84 at the bottom of the page, you have a bullet point: increase shrub age, class diversity and recruitment, particularly for bitterbrush, as this species is important browse species for the Loyalton Truckee deer herd. Bitterbrush, in my opinion, is an invasive species brought up here by the sheep from Reno, and it's also known as creosote bush, and it's exceedingly flammable, and I spend a lot of time every year removing every piece of it from my property. So I think that's a terrible idea to encourage bitterbrush for four-legged rats.
Oh, easy there. Noted. Any other thoughts or comments from you guys? I had a question about the fiscal impact. Is this a new expense, or do we have a line item for it already?
It is not a new expense. Every year we budget funds. We used to just call it forest management, but now it's lands management. So it's something we do every year.
So what do you need from us tonight? Do we need a motion to approve this?
It'd be a motion to accept the plan, because every year you'll approve the fiscal expenditure, but it's just an acceptance. And I do want to tell Kat that you're going to get the pavement maintenance plan in about 2 months. So sorry, you're going to have to read that one too.
Yay!
Mary's excited.
I'm the engineer. Yay!
All right, and yeah, I'm in finance. Rick's in construction. Yeah. All right, so we need a motion, or is that where we're going with this?
I think there's a sample motion on this in the staff report.
There's not.
Those are not. We didn't put one. Sorry. So just accepting the plan, and
yeah,
and that's all we need.
I'll make a motion to accept the land management plan dated September 2020.
I'll second.
Roll call.
Or did you do? Do we have public comment? I'm sorry.
Oh no, we didn't. Public comment. Where's Josh?
No public comment.
Okay, you now you're.
Okay. The public comment. All right. Director or Vice President Diamond. Oh, okay. Director Hetherington.
Yes.
President Odette.
Yes.
Director Rolfe.
Yes.
Director Stevens.
No, because of the bitter brush. Other than that, yes.
Okay. We'll take that as a yes.
Talk about bitter.
You
Officially,
do.
that's a yes.
Thank you,
All right.
Matt and Dave. Thank you so much. Job well done.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And Rick, we promise if we decide to plant bitter brush, it'll be part of the budget conversation, and it won't be done without your.
Make sure you put it close to Rick's house. Lahan.
Come over.
All right.
You can pull my bitter brush with me.
Are we on to 15? Discussion
15,
of
yes.
possible action on master plan update request for proposals.
Yeah. So we talked about this on February 11th at our workshop. So we put together an RFP that we would like to put out. I'm trying to find out strategically the best time to put it out on the street, just to make sure that it's optimal for public input on this. But we've talked about, we have a master plan that was approved in 2015, and it's in need of a refresh in certain areas. And I think there's some board members that feel like it maybe needs to be rewritten. You can see from my staff report, the staff recommendation is essentially to continue with some of the update work we've already done. You will be getting, I think, I've got it programmed for May, you'll get the forecast, which is chapter 2. And with the forecast, you'll actually get chapter 1 updated too. So we have a consultant that's already updating the first 2 chapters of the master plan. And what staff's suggesting is that we dive into the other sections, particularly chapter 3 and chapter 4. And chapter 4 is the alternatives analysis, because I think that's the one that maybe has the most interest by the board, to kind of look 5 years later, where are we at? What are some things that we could consider? We had this whole conversation on runway 220, whether or not we want to widen and extend. Let's revisit that and look at anything else that you want to do. In the motion, we also talk about the idea that we have a consultant that's under contract to help us with planning, which includes master planning and GIS. And so staff's recommendation is you get a quote from them to continue that work. I also have another option in there that if the board did want to go out and look at other consultants, we can do that. I think there could be some extra time and cost in doing that, but we can. And then a third option in there is to, if we want to continue using our current consultant, which staff supports, we could ask them to bring in some new planners from their aviation group, which is quite broad, so that we have fresh eyes looking at some of these concepts. And the last thing I'll say is I do really feel like it's best if when we do our outreach meetings, whether we have 3, 4, 5, 10, however many, that we have opportunities for those to be done in person. So I'm hoping that mid to late summer, that's also when the most aircraft noise is occurring. August, September, we could actually have these workshops where we invite people in to look at some of the things that we're talking about. Doing these virtual are problematic, can be done, but it's not the same. So with that, I'll turn it over to get all of the board comments that you might have on this.
Okay, let's start with Rick Stevens.
I support option 2, getting a proposal from Mead and Hunt, but also others. It's nice to have them know that we're checking their work. That's it.
David Diamond.
I agree with option 2. I feel like if we determine that meat and hunt is the best solution for this, that's fantastic. If we determine somebody else might be the better solution for this, then maybe later on when we're in the general services planning process, that would be helpful. So I fear that there's no reason for us to not, as Rick was saying, just to kind of verify where we are, where we should be with them.
Mary?
I agree. I think, it's time to open it up and look at it and look at other alternatives and fresh eyes. And, like they say, if Meat and Hunt's got stuff, but, we had really good choices last time, and there's a lot
out there still.
Yep, they're still out there. So I agree.
Kat?
I agree.
Okay, I have a question about, we're piecemealing it. You want to update the first 4 chapters. What kind of exponential cost increase if we do the whole thing? Well, and how old is this?
It's only 5 years old, and so for a master plan that, in the master planning world, that's fairly recent. I don't think, my own opinion, I read it cover to cover again. I mean, there is obviously any planning document needs some refreshing and updating. That's what I'm suggesting. I think that the chapter that could use the most work is chapter 4, and that's the one that really dives into alternatives. But I think that'd be the fun one to get into with the public and talk about, hey, here's what we thought in 2015, here's what we're thinking in 2030, and have those conversations and get some input. I think we could also, as I put in my scope, we could also do sustainability and add a sustainability chapter and have that added to the master plan. But I would put this in the update category. I don't think it's a rework of the whole document. I think that would be, I don't think that's necessary.
Is it exponentially more expensive if we did go that route?
Yes.
Okay.
And on top of that, the most expensive thing is the airport layout plan update and the forecast. Those are the 2 things, and we're essentially in 2019 and 2020 we chose to update those. So the forecast follows an FAA model. It's not something that we can torque or manipulate. It essentially comes off of an FAA criteria that they design that off of. We have some input, and you are going to have input here in a few months when we look at it. But those things have been essentially completed. So it's just refreshing these other sections.
Okay, and then I think opening up RFP, other consultants. I know Mead and Hunt's been here as long as I've been here, but I'm really eager to hear of new ideas from new thought process, new people. Hopefully, I mean, I assume we have to choose based on who's the cheapest?
We can. So typically when we do master plans, if you use federal funds, you have to base it off qualifications. We have because we're funding it ourselves, we have the ability to look at both, to look at cost and qualifications, which I think is the best way to go.
Can we run dual track where we get a bid for them just to a bid and timeline from Mead and Hunt just to do those chapters versus a full RFP, get a bid from them for a full RFP. So we know that delta in price, and we also have timelines from, looking at it all.
Sorry, to have somebody come in and redo the forecast, redo the ALP and some of those things that, I guess my concern is we just paid for those, and why would we want to pay to have them done again?
I think Mary's just saying, let's get 2 RFPs. One for chapters 1 through 4 or 5, or whatever you're suggesting, and a full new deal. And would other outside consultants want to update someone else's work?
If it's FAA, defined method, they could just absorb it.
Okay.
I mean, defined by the FAA, this is the way you got to do it. Then they don't have to redo it.
Okay.
So we'll have 2 RFPs, one to completely redo the master plan, start over, check the old one, and then another one where we're just updating certain portions of it. I guess I'm not sure what the first one would say.
It doesn't cost us anything to throw out an RFP, right?
No.
So let's throw it out there and see how much it would cost to do a whole new one, and then just to update. I like options.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll make that motion,
Do we have to make a motion?
Chairman.
All right, then I will make a motion. We send out 2 RFPs, one for an update and one for a full new master plan.
I second that motion.
All right. We have public comment, I guess, right?
Public comment?
No public comment.
All right.
Okay, roll call.
All right. Vice President Diamond,
You're muted.
muted. I guess that's a yes. I think I.
We can read his lips.
Okay. You take smiles as yes too. So. Director Hetherington,
Yes.
President Odette,
Yes.
Director Rolfe,
Yes.
Director Stevens.
Yes.
Okay.
And part of that RFP should be timelines.
Oh yeah, that's it'll be in there. If it's not already.
Okay.
I'll make sure that's in there.
Okay, we got board ad hoc committee reports and other items. Board committee assignments. Mountain House and Council is first.
Absolutely nothing to report. The town of Truckee is still studying SB2. It's only taken a year and they haven't come out with a study yet. Placer County is moving forward on NAHAS, but slowly.
Good.
That's it.
Okay, this is revenue and cost allocation.
You want to do it, Mary?
You can.
Okay, we've been looking at various iterations of a spreadsheet for primary and secondary categories, and we feel like as of a few days ago that we're at something that that is pretty good. And so I'm guessing that by next board meeting we will have something to show you to get some feedback from you on the categorization.
And we're waiting. Kelly has to finish up the audit to get the 2020 data to them anyway, so they can't really be doing stuff till we get this stuff defined, and then Kelly gets. That's the only, I think, remaining piece that needs to get there to them. So it's all moving.
Okay. How about agency partnership ad hoc?
Kevin and Kat and I met with the TTCF, talked about the various parameters, told them that we would have to put out an RFP because they couldn't be the only one. We were going to solicit maybe 3 proposals. And then Kevin went away and did a draft and sent it to us. I gave him my comments. Kat, I don't think, has given comments, but my comments were de minimis. And so I suggest that we send it out and see what comes back.
And just to clarify, Mark Lamb did a lot of heavy lifting on that one. So I want to thank Mark for his help on that.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Any board member comments or questions on the 3 ad hoc committee reports? No. Okay. Any public comment? Oh, go ahead.
I'll just say one comment on the housing JPA. I believe is on that item too, right? That there is. It looks like there may be new members joining, so it may be growing a little bit, keeping the original scope. But I just want to let you know that there are conversations right now of having some other members join that.
Like who?
So it would be Placer County, Nevada County, and the town of Truckee.
I think those are terrible ideas, Kevin.
Yes, I know. I know some don't agree.
Pardon me?
I know. I remember you telling us. That's why I'm putting it out there that there is some conversations with them.
Well, you get the approving agencies, and my experience with those approving agencies is they're incredibly bureaucratic and will slow the process down.
Yeah. I'm not
Don't
sure.
do it.
Well, we will take that under consideration. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Whose decision is it to allow them in?
Well, it's the JPA board, which is I'm your board member, and so I could get your input on that, and it'll come. We have time to talk about it. I hear what Rick's saying. I also, just having worked for cities in the past, I do think there's also some advantages to having them on board, as long as the scope and the the vision and function of what the JPA is and isn't is very, very clear. And that's one of the things that we're trying to work through right now.
Can you outvote them?
Well, yeah, that's one of the things we're looking at in the process of adding new members. One of the things we're looking at is the 4 founding members are the only ones that can actually change the scope and function of the group. So, for instance, if others wanted to say, okay, it's not just workforce housing for employees of the districts, for everyone, the 4 founding members would have to, by supermajority, would have to agree to that. So it does give you more control over, but we're still looking at it. I just want you to know that over time, the intent of the JPA was to grow and have more public agencies as partners. And so, but I hear what you're saying, Rick, and we've shared some of those same concerns of larger organizations joining and trying to overpower the original intent, which we don't want to occur.
Okay. Any other board member comments?
No.
Any public comment?
No public comment.
Right. Thank you for those. Let's go to 17. Discussion regarding potential participation in a regional greenhouse gas house reduction in JPA.
Okay, so this started, I got a call one day from Krista Finn, who's the president of Truckee Donner PUD. And she and Anna Klofstad had been talking about helping the school district get some electric buses. And she wanted to know if the airport would be interested in buying some electric buses for the school district. And so what I said to her was there were a few things going on. First of all, that we were sort of revamping the way that we were spending money on that. And and part of that was that we are looking for a more discipline, I guess I would say, with regard to having a peripheral aviation connection to whatever investments we're making. So I went back to them. We were in a meeting with Jen Calloway was also there. Brian Wright was also there. And I said, how would you feel about a JPA to address greenhouse gas reduction in the region? We would get some partners on board, and we would look at various projects. The school bus could be one of the projects. There could be other projects. Biomass could be another project. Defensible space, fuels reduction, that sort of thing could be another project, because these are all greenhouse gas related projects. They both liked that idea. So we did a sort of an immediate plan to contact some other people in the area to see who was interested in this, and to what extent. And I got the following people have all given me their approval to say that they are on board with this, and that they are looking forward to the airport board agreeing to sign a letter of intent to participate in something like this, that they can take back to their respective boards. Those people are Hardy Bullock, Supervisor Bullock, Anna Klofstad, Mayor of Truckee, Krista Finn, President of the Truckee Donner PUD, Sarah Coolidge, President of the North Tahoe PUD, Gerald Herrick, Director at Truckee Fire Protection District, and Bill Saline, Chief of the Truckee Fire Protection District. And we've had some peripheral conversations with others who would not necessarily be members, but who are community involved. There seems to be a lot of enthusiasm for this, and so we're kind of looking to see, can we build a structure where we can serve our own goal, because this is one of our goals for 2021. It's also one of the town's goals. It's also the PUD's goal. So many of these agencies all have this goal of greenhouse gas reduction. So we're just looking to form a JPA, kind of in the image of the mountain housing, because that now that I talked to Kevin and we kind of know how that works, and find that to be productive. Same thing for greenhouse gas. So what I'm asking you as board members is, would you be interested in this, and would you be willing to have us sign or create a letter of intent that these others can take to their boards to gauge actual interest?
What's our funding obligation?
It's my question too.
Yeah, none of that is defined yet. So if it's similar to the housing council was like 30,000 buy-in, was it?
Yeah,
we put in 50 for 3 years, and then we did another 55 for 3 more years.
yeah, that's the housing council. The JPA was a little different. It was a little less, but yeah.
Right. So those things have not been defined yet. It's at the early stages right now where everybody just wants to know who's interested, and then we would all have a discussion about that sort of thing, or that and other stuff as well.
Maybe, David, if I could add one more thing. This was an interesting topic in our area managers meeting this afternoon. There are a lot of agencies that are interested in that, and the idea of more collaboration, working together on some of these things that have regional impact that can be mitigated, or there could be good created from it. And so there are some legs to this, and a lot of people talking about it. I'll just put that out there.
Well, it's certainly one way to work on it, that we can impact the airport's greenhouse gas impact. It's kind of hard to tell people to stop flying.
Okay. Mary, your thoughts?
Well, the airport has become under Kevin, has been very good at this cross-pollination. And you know me, and it's all about regionalism, that we need to think of ourselves as a region. And Kevin's really good at it.
You've been there the whole time, Mary, that I've been here. So,
and just this whole, the airport started with this land use plan, but with Rec and Park District in the town that worked with, and the housing JPA. We were the first ones to say, hey, let's do something. And I think that there's another place where the airport can say, hey, we're in, who else is in? The other aspect of that that's really interesting is that it's fuels reduction, it's transportation, it's electric bikes, who knows what it's going to entail. But in terms of fuels reduction, it's also what we discovered when we started managing Model Ranch was by thinning it, you get the trees to grow bigger, and they actually hold more carbon by being bigger as compared to 10 trees in a small area and how much mass that contains. If you thin it down to 2, it can hold a whole lot more carbon. And to some extent, this could actually help fund some of the work that's being done because we have such big acreage. So it actually could help us to fund some of our projects, and it can also address what everybody agrees are big issues: transportation, fuels management. Those are the big ones.
Don't forget biomass. A lot of people want to talk about biomass.
Yeah, I know that.
That's part of it.
Okay. Kat, you have thoughts and questions?
No, I don't really have any questions. I think it sounds really exciting. I don't see any reason not to move forward with this and find out more about it.
Awesome. I think it's a great idea. Let's do it. What do you need from us?
Just an agreement to have us draft a letter of intent that we can then share with these other they're all waiting basically to get something from us to take to their boards.
Why us?
Consensus.
Why should somebody else lead it?
I just think because we are the most efficient, forward-thinking board in this entire region.
That's why I asked
Thanks.
how much money they want.
Thanks for the compliment, David.
If you think about what we've done tonight in this meeting, we are selling a snowblower, and we're going to use that money for greenhouse gas reduction projects. And we've saved ourselves $50,000 on ACAT. Right there is our buy-in on both of those projects. See how efficient we are?
We'll talk about the funding later. That's not part of this, but we will write your letter.
Okay, awesome.
So,
a lot of people are right now.
And and it's in everybody's benefit. These are the issues that benefit every special district up here, and it gets us working together as a region. It's awesome. Is that something we can take action on with the letter of intent, or is this go by for another
I think
month?
what I would just suggest is that the board authorize myself, and I can actually send it out to y'all and so you can see it, but I think I'm trying to think back to my area managers meetings. The others are wondering who else is interested. And so I think others are going to be producing similar letters that you aggregate that together. Then you get this exploratory group of agencies that start meeting to figure out how to form. And then you go through that process that we went through at the JPA where you hire a consultant, you pay them a little bit of money, they help you get the thing going. So I think what I would do is just put a letter together that would indicate that the airport district does have interest in pursuing a regional joint powers authority to address climate change and greenhouse gas reduction and some of those things. And then we would just put it out to the wider community and say, here we are.
To more seriously address what Rick had said, I actually think it has a lot to do with Kevin, because they know how the Mountain Housing Council went down and how that was formed and all that. So they are sort of deferring to the airports and indirectly through Kevin, that expertise in knowing how this goes. So I think that has a lot to do with why they're waiting on.
Well, we were the first to commit
on fronts.
On a lot of them, but Mountain Housing Council for sure.
Yeah, I do think you'll get a lot of support from other agencies. I do want to give kudos to Ted Owens, who's very also involved in this JPA formation. He and I guess, started it, but Ted did a lot of the work. But yeah, so I think some of those same organizations that helped with the housing JPA are willing to jump in on this too, it sounded like.
So you would draft this letter, you would sign it, because you're getting consensus here, and the other special districts to kind of say, hey, this is what we're
willing to be involved in an exploratory committee to figure it out if there's,
Great.
Thank you.
I say yes.
Yep. Okay. I think we have some public comment on this. Yes?
Yes. This is Christina Finn, President of Truckee Donner PUD Board of Directors. I am writing to support the Airport Board's consideration of entering into a JPA with other local districts to address regional greenhouse gas reductions. This is the challenge of our times, and I believe that the only way we can rise to it is together. I believe that there is tremendous potential for us to support each other and to move our community towards a more sustainable and livable future. Second one is Ruth Miller. I am a planning commissioner in Truckee and a lifelong transportation planner and advocate, and I'm writing in regard to agenda item 17. The board is well aware of and has spoken clearly in the past about our current precarious position in regards to affordability. The community we love is under threat from economic pressures beyond our control, and I expect nearly all of us know someone who has had to relocate against their own wishes simply because people from other regional job markets have been able to outcompete them for housing. This situation is messy, personal, and complicated because if it were easy to solve with our existing systems and tools, it'd be done by now. We don't have clear solutions on the horizon other than hoping the winds of change begin to shift. Those staffed and capable and dedicated people, the existing organizational structures within Truckee cannot individually handle an existential crisis like our housing situation, let alone something as big as climate change. We need regional thinking that centers the Truckee region, which our current regional governments, TNT, TMA, and TRPA simply are not designed to do. No current entity, not the airport, not the hospital, not the school or town, has the bandwidth, financial resources, or political capital to make these issues on alone. A joint powers authority would be the first organization even close to meeting this challenge. A JPA could create the forum to bring forth these big challenges and assemble the many voices needed to find real solutions. These challenges don't belong solely to the airport, but as a major source of leadership. We won't solve them without the airport bearing its fair share of responsibility. The JPA is the perfect format to begin pursuing new regional solutions. Third, Sarah Coolidge. Hello, please share my comment with the board for agenda item 7. I am deeply interested in any regional collaborations that support environmental stability and sustainability and encourage the airport district to explore the formation of a JPA to address this. I look forward to sharing the results of your discussion today with the rest of the North Tahoe PUD board for their input and ideas. And that completes the written submitted comments.
Do you have any others that aren't written?
Nope, I'm just checking the chat. None. Thank you.
Thank you. So you have what you need on this, Kevin? Write a letter. We're in support.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Let's go to 18, future agenda priorities and meeting management.
Yeah, so just a couple items for April, just to be prepared for. A couple things that aren't on the list on the rolling agenda is you will get a report on the oh gosh, I'm tongue-tied. The quit calling list, I guess, is the best way to, the folks that didn't call. So that'll be an agenda item that we'll have some discussion on. So because I imagine people are going to want to talk about that. So that'll be on there. There'll be it'll probably be a standard procedure instruction, and that's something I craft, but I'll put that on the agenda for the ACT forum, or for the general manager's ACT team, or whatever we're going to call it. That'll be on there too. We also need to do the LAFCO voting. So Rick Stevens has been nominated for LAFCO, and I do have a ballot, but there's two votes, and so I need to know who else you want to vote for. So that'll be on there. A couple other big items. With a lot of interest on the rental car space. We're very excited about that. Three good rental car companies. The one that's in there currently is getting current, because I've had some questions on that. They know that their position's not very good if they owe us a lot of money when they want to renew so Hertz through their bankruptcy, but they are becoming current. But Hertz, Avis, and Go Rentals all want that space. Avis will be bringing in budget also, and Enterprise also wants to bring national. So they'll have 4 brands over there. And so there'll be a lot to look at for that, because we'll have that for you next month. The other big ones to kind of keep in mind, the momentary switch, we've talked about that. The air traffic control tower service contract approval, that might be May. Hardy, are we thinking that could be May, or could that be April?
We're ready when you're ready.
Okay, so that's coming up. And then the Boys and Girls Club want to talk to the board about renewing their service contract. It's not a partnership, it's a service agreement. So we'll have some conversation with them coming up with what they've been doing. And I'm missing one I wanted to mention. The Tahoe City land acquisition MOU. So the Tahoe City PUD approved a resolution or a memorandum of understanding for our participation in some land over there. So that'll come forward, and we have some things to share on that. So that's kind of what you got coming up in April.
Manageable so far?
Yeah, so far.
Okay. Well, if that's it, do we need to get adjourned from here and go into closed session?
Yeah, so we have closed session, but I think if there is public comment on the closed session, do we take that first? Or when do we do?
Yes, we should. Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, we should take that first before we recess into closed session.
Okay.
We don't have public comment for closed session.
Who told me we had somebody? Oh, David, did you say there was somebody that had a comment that someone sent to you, or did they?
I was sent background information that I found was not intended to be public comment, but that I could reference in closed session.
Okay, so no one asked. Okay, no one asked. I thought there was someone that wanted to mention something on that. Okay.
Not through. Yeah, sorry.
So we adjourn. We have to vote on adjourning. We're just
now we can recess into closed session, and board members, please use the link that was sent out.
Okay. Are we coming back to this to close?
Yes, we'll need to come back and adjourn the meeting in this link.
Okay.
Yeah,
see you guys in a minute.
Yep.
Thank you.
Teresa, I move we adjourn.
Do you have a report? Do you have a report out of closed session?
Just direction given to
I
staff.
can't hear any of you.
Reportable action at a closed session.
Okay.
Is that it? Somebody need to say that besides Josh?
Yeah, I don't think you don't have to make a motion now, right? It's just direction.
Okay,
Now just, yep, if there's consensus to adjourn.
good night.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Consensus to adjourn. Thank you. See you in a
Thanks,
month.
everyone.
All right.
Good meeting. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.